Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I am the Microsoft Tech Community Lead, and I am joined by Megan and Loryan. I think this is my first husband and wife call for this Modern Workplace series. So thank you so much for the conversation on Twitter, Loryan, and thank you for roping in your better half into this conversation. So why don't we start off with some intros? Let's start with Megan. Can you tell us where you are right now and what you do in your day job?
Sure. Thanks, Anna. So I am an adoption specialist, or I guess Office 365 change specialist. I've been doing so for solely focused on Microsoft for about 6 years. And I left a partner at the end of last year, and right now I'm launching into some solo consulting this year, just helping customers get more out of Office 365.
Awesome. So glad to have you as part of this conversation. You're clearly an expert. What about you, Loryan?
So I'm a Microsoft MVP. I used to run a partner that did migrations to Office 365, and for the last 18 months, I've been solo consulting, helping organizations with roadmaps and governance and life cycle, and basically just trying to navigate the waters of their Office 365 journey. So the solo venture that Megan refers to is actually us working together, but solo.
Yeah. I realised I said that. Yeah. So we used to work together at a partner. And together that his company, yes. And we've just as of yesterday decided to launch working together consulting.
And where we are is in Melbourne, Australia, and Megan's on a step.
So she's not that tall in real life, people. So be aware.
It's better for the call.
It's totally fine. Short people problems, I totally relate.
I think mavens and short people do it better.
Yes, they do. We're very space efficient. That's another term for it. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience dealing with different types of organizations when it comes to change management, Megan. So can you kind of give us a view into the types of organizations, how big they are, how small they are?
Yeah, so over the years, and it's interesting because there's been obviously a lot of changes. I would say in the 2012, 2013, there was a phase where it was all about universities and education. So there was thousands of users, kind of almost minimal change because it was just getting them, just Exchange migrations and maybe OneDrive or things. So there's been a lot of big, large companies, universities, large government entities, and some schools. I've done a lot of work with, say, logistics. Just last year, worked with a global logistics Office 365 implementation. But there's also been a lot of work in the private sector, sort of more medium-sized companies as well, law, real estate, just lots of different size organisations, councils across Australia as well.
In the last 18 months, I've probably spent most of my time actually working with government, be it local, state and federal. And what's interesting with them is because they're only just starting their journeys effectively to Office 365 with Exchange migration, they actually have the benefit of all of the bones of the past, where they can actually take all those learnings and go straight to a better way of doing things instead of this, then this, then this. So it's been actually quite interesting, kind of almost coming to this full circle and still doing these Exchange migrations, but with the view of now you can do it differently from how it was done before.
Yeah, so a lot of these projects, I mean, they've been, going on for some period of time, and maybe the ones that were older are a little bit different to the ones now. Are you actually noticing, a different driver for these types of changes?
Yeah, definitely. I guess particularly, I would say the last 2 years has been much more about more of the suite as possible. So the earlier projects were, we want to move into the cloud. It was probably a lot to do with, say, security and access, or just almost like, cost saving as well. We want to get off this infrastructure. We want to get into the cloud. So it was large scale Exchange migrations, and often then for a while it was coupled with a Skype for Business add-on and maybe cloud storage library like OneDrive for Business or SkyDrive as it was back then as well. Yeah. Gradually it became almost like threefold: Exchange, Skype and OneDrive. We did so many of those projects, and it was about launching the product. The last 18 months has been really different work. So it's been, okay, we're in the cloud, but really educating on the suite and turning things on, the whole thing of previously turn it all off because it's too scary. We'll just get them to understand the cloud. The last 18 months, as I said, what is the suite, what are all these applications, and how can we work with it all? So there's definitely been a big transition.
And I think also people.
Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
The IT thing, the fact that people have gone out there and used Dropbox and Asana and Prezi and all these other apps, and then execs are finally realizing what they've actually purchased and saying, wait, don't we have all these already? Why aren't we using them? Why is our data being leaked everywhere?
Yeah, at one point it was too hard. It used to be, we get that people use Dropbox, we get that they've got other shadow IT. That's a bit too hard. Just help us access our file shares from home. But now there's more of a move to, oh, wait, we can replace Trello and Dropbox with Microsoft tools all in the ecosystem. So that now we've found that they're really interested in bringing it all in now and cutting out that don't comply or are risky.
Yep.
Yeah. So it sounds like those conversations are mainly being had with IT. Are those same conversations being had with the business end?
Well, it's interesting. I think when we were first working, and I mean, as in together, because Loryan worked with BPOS and previous Microsoft stuff, but when 2012, 2013, 2014, around that stage, it was all to do with IT projects and an IT manager. And I remember us talking about, and with our business associates and partners, we've got to talk to the execs, we've got to talk to the business people. And it was hard to get that conversation. But I personally think these days now, it's a different conversation. And even albeit threatening at times, it seems, the IT managers are getting a bit nervous because the senior execs and others in the business want to get involved now. They want to understand how technology can change the business.
I think from my perspective, I actually, the way I generally advocate it with the clients when I work with them is that Office 365 is actually a suite of end user tools, because it's not IT, it's not the executives that are going to tell you to use forms to digitize this process or how to build your flow and those kind of things. It's up to the users to kind of find their own journey, and the users already have been in different workplaces, in their personal lives, or just on their own in their current jobs. So the way I kind of is explain to them is, this is actually a user suite of tools that you need to support, facilitate, embrace. So your job is to make sure it can work and that your users can use it. But apart from that, let them find their own way with the right guidance, but let them use the suite.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting that it moved beyond an IT conversation.
Yeah,
and I feel like also to get the business interested in coming to a workshop or getting involved. And now people, now it is, but it's great. Now it's really has become not an IT conversation. It's about, it's more of a cultural. And as a change manager, I mean, personally, I remember thinking a few years ago, I'm being labelled, or I'm in a niche of a technology go live. Now I'm doing a cultural shift and ways people work together. So I haven't done it different. I've stuck with Office 365, but it's definitely shifted.
Okay, interesting. So, you mentioned that Office 365, it could be seen as a suite of end user applications or solutions, but it's often a case of you don't know what you don't know, right? So what are some best practices that you've seen to help people understand what is available in everything that is in Office 365, and how does how does IT play a role in that process?
Part of their role is to get other people.
Yeah.
It is. It's definitely. So, I mean, a key thing that we have to do is, we were talking about this yesterday, actually, with a current customer, is they, as an example, they've rolled it all out June last year. They turned everything on. What they found, typical conversation, people aren't using it. They're not getting the value. What can we do? How can we help? And one thing I was saying was, you've actually pushed everything at people. You've sent comms, you've put some videos online. So it's been very one direction. And one of the key best practice or things that we're working with at the moment is having conversations, as in a broad dialogue with the users. We've talked a lot with Microsoft, have talked a lot about building personas, from that perspective. But one thing that I'm doing now with a lot of customers is actually listening to people. And what I mean by that is, rather than just turning it on, giving a user guide and running training, going into the organization, doing deep dives with departments and going, how do you work? And that way, we're actually then asking questions about how they work and then telling them about the product, instead of, here's a library, you upload and you can share with a link. So that's what I feel is really needed these days, is really to listen and to find these pockets of things that people do so we can then bring in the technology to enhance how they work. And that's where I find we pick up what they don't know and what we don't know that they don't know, if that makes sense. That's one key thing.
The other aspect to that is a lot of what I do, to your point about, they don't know what they don't know, is I will generally, when forming a roadmap, I actually also take organizations, not every user, but like a sampling of users from all across the areas of all levels through the entire suite, like whatever they're licensed for. And I flat out tell them up front, this is going to be boring. There's going to be bits where you're not interested and bits where you are interested. But I'm doing exactly that, which is you don't know what you don't know. Yes, I can sit down with you and workshop this and do, whiteboard it and wireframe it and figure something out for you. Or I can put it in your hands and go, what do you want out of this? And that's where I think between my approach and Megan's approach, we then kind of congeal something out of it. Because it's a combination of I found something that works for you, but also you didn't know what you needed until I showed you this thing. And now you've gone, so I can do this in 5 minutes. I want that.
Yeah. So to Megan's point about really listening and actively listening to what the users want, I had a really good conversation just prior to this call with Simon Terry about value and defining value, because, you could show them all the tools, like you could show them forms, but if you don't tell them, hey, you could use this to scale soliciting feedback, that's really the value there, and speaking in their language. So have you found, is there some sort of recipe or a checklist, if you will, in terms of what are the key things to look out for when it comes to listening to end users' needs?
Pain points. One. So project last year, we did a big campaign around pain points, and it was essentially, we know that, people have been trained on it, but that doesn't mean that they know how it fits into their day and how they can be more effective. So that was a big sweep, kind of like sweeping through and saying indirectly, we're listening and we're going to help you fix things. We went, tell us your Office 365 frustrations, and we did pop-ups across the organisation in various areas to sort of literally show that we're here to listen. So finding out what they're frustrated about and what they don't understand. I mean, it's like a broad retrospective, what doesn't work and what are you confused about. So having some sort of, I think, consistent method, like a retrospective, a focus group, a pop-up or a survey, to bring in all the information, and then literally just sift through and think through and go, hey, look at this. Everyone's confused about this whole area. And, with that, then obviously there's a number of things we do with it, whether it's tips and tricks, a whole campaign. I was in an organisation, I did some metrics about 3 months ago where I went, less than 40% of people are using OneDrive for Business, and it's been rolled out 6 months ago. I'm in to have a look, and I went, that's a big flag for me, because they did a launch and they think that everyone moved from their hard drives and everything into OneDrive, but a large number of people are not using it. So basically, I guess a consistent framework or method to bring it all in, and then clear ways that you want to use the information is probably a key aspect of it.
And I think from a value perspective, we always have to start with them. Like, what's in it for me? This person who's in my workshop, why have they come? Okay, their manager has told them to come. So why am I going to get them, or how am I going to get them to pay attention to me? How am I going to make it relevant to them? So I think probably the value comes, but there's definitely the relevancy, which is why do I care? And this is where, for example, I look at, one example is Planner is a great way of changing how people work together as a team. Sure, you as an individual cannot manage your own tasks. What's the point of introducing another tool? So in that, what I do for some clients, depending on where they're at, is introduce them to things like To Do and say, hey, fix yourself before you go around and fix the business or fix the team, because then you'll be able to take the learnings from that tool and then apply it slightly differently to this other tool. And that makes a huge difference, is when you talk about, hey, here's how we're going to communicate, and then here's how it's going to work.
One thing that made me think of was another challenge that I've had in more projects than I'd probably like, is a really passionate senior stakeholder who wants to drive a product, and actually I don't think people care about it as much as they think. Last project where one of the senior stakeholders in the project said everyone needs to use Sway. Everyone. And it was to the point of extreme frustration where I love Sway and I think there's a place for it, but trying to bring him down from that and get him to see that maybe To-Do or maybe other applications will be more valued by people.
Yeah.
So the balance tools, that can be a really challenging one. And so, going back to the relevance, when we listen to people or when we look at the data, understanding, another example was in a project where they were concerned that there was not a lot of high use of screen share in Skype. And it was, oh my goodness, the stakeholders and in the team, we thought, I screen share a lot. A few of us, oh my goodness, people don't know. So maybe it's their confidence. So should we do a campaign around that? But really understanding, is screen share that relevant? Because there are other ways to collaborate. And I had to question, is it worth driving this over other priorities? So I guess relevance, priorities, what you want to put budget and time into is key as well.
And I think also speaking their language, you've got to get the right language. It's no point me talking, using language that I've picked up from a council client of mine when I go talk to a university, because the client may have 1,000 users, the university may have 10,000 users. So we're talking about different scales, about, faculty versus staff. We're talking about, students versus residents. So, these, small details and almost being pedantic about the language make a huge difference to whether somebody cares what you're saying or not.
Yeah, we had that we actually had some customer conversations in December, and they found through survey that there was basically that a large amount of dissatisfaction from when they rolled out was on average from, it was a generational difference. So it was men around 45 to 60 who worked in a research department. And so that was an interesting conversation. So you've got 8,000 employees, you've got this large number that you think also is a good number of, say, millennials or certain age groups. It was this group that stood out that we went, this is really interesting. This is a generational gap or difference in Office 365 and the priorities over here in this business we need to handle really differently, because they were very resistant, but they just stood out so clearly to us. So that was, again, another interesting challenge of, okay, how do we make it relevant to them? How do we get them passionate as opposed to everyone else seems okay? So that was just another interesting thought.
Yeah. So there was one thing that you mentioned. You mentioned this a couple of times around metrics. You mentioned that there was one customer who only had 40% of people using OneDrive and a percentage of people using screen share. So that touches on metrics and sort of measuring the success of change management. So you mentioned pain points as a really key defining way of potentially defining a goal. So how did you come to those metrics to say, okay, well, this is the pain point, which is X, and ultimately we're trying to get to this measurement of, 100% deployment of OneDrive. Like, how do we define each of those things, figure out what they are?
Yeah, so I guess the core goals or things that I would look at as if the highest level goals of, say, a project would be adoption versus satisfaction as well. Okay. So we want to have, workloads activated. We want to have ROI. We want to help a company, but I'm really passionate about people being satisfied and people enjoying their day-to-day and enjoying the tools they work with, almost more over money, but don't tell anybody that. But I just want people to love Office 365. So it's interesting. A lot of companies and a lot of projects, we probably rely on survey and we're probably getting qualitative data. I'm really surprised the number of customers we go into who have never, ever heard of the adoption metrics and the portal and the dashboard. So it's interesting how many projects we're kind of introducing them to that sort of information. They don't know what to do with it. And so it's less common in customers, I feel, to really getting value out of the quantitative data. But once you get in there, it can be really powerful. I've been using the metrics for Skype launches for the whole time I've been doing this because it's so low-hanging fruit. looking at, say, down to a Loryan Strant, how many IMs he does, and if he does how many minutes in video calls versus screen share. That's a really easy one. So I find that really valuable. The dashboards around collaboration and some of the newer stuff, I'm still sort of working out what can we do with this, but I'm always constantly looking at quantitative versus qualitative and bringing it all up.
And numbers don't lie. I mean, there's customers that I've spoken to who, when we've talked about Teams as an example, and they've said, everybody here uses Teams, we love it. And then we actually look at the dashboards, like 22% of the organization has used Teams.
Yeah.
Meaning 78% has never logged in once. So everyone is not really everybody. So that's the thing is, I think a lot of times people are looking at how their organization works, how their people work, their satisfaction levels through their own kind of little kaleidoscope and their own view of the world. So when you actually present the numbers to them, now, in all honesty, the numbers often aren't anything on their own. It's like, yes, Loryan did send this many IMs, but this might be this many IMs me saying, I hate Skype for Business, I can't use it. Or, are you there? I can't hear you. So that's the thing is you've got to then match it up with the actual personal data of like, are you satisfied? Does this help your job?
Yeah.
What has the impact been to your job? And then look at those metrics. And if someone's saying, for example, I'm not happy with Office 365, I can go, well, you're not using it. So let's have a look at why.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's important to have the right questions. The survey has to be really powerful. You can ask everyone. I mean, one survey we looked at recently said the company surveyed how satisfied they were with the project, and everyone was really positive. Did they feel that the new tools over a competing brand, I won't say, but they'd done a big shift to a Microsoft tools, were they more or less effective in their job? And they said less effective. However, the next question was, once you become comfortable with the tools, do you feel that you'll be more or less productive? And they all said equal in productivity or better with Microsoft. So it's interesting that they felt that I don't get it right now and I've slowed down in my job, but I think once I get it, it's going to be better. It's like this golden light that they're heading towards. So I really loved that survey, that it kept it positive, and then it was a case of opportunity. There's all this opportunity that we can get them here. But my point is, the survey questions have to be really good, because you can ask, are you satisfied in general ways, and then look at the metrics. But how do you know, is Anna not using Skype because she doesn't know, she doesn't care, or maybe it's not valid for her job? So you've got to be really careful with it.
Yeah. So, gosh, we could talk for hours about this topic. There's so much to do. But one thing that I really want people to think about, or at least be thinking about when it comes to driving adoption, is, okay, so we know it's important to listen to your end users and also to your senior leadership. I've done all the listening, I've collected all my survey responses, and it's telling me a whole bunch of stuff. How do you prioritize, and so that you can ultimately figure out what those projects could be, what the first project could be anyway?
So, and something that everyone probably wants to hear about is quick wins. So that is something that, it's funny, one of the first questions will be like, what can we do straight away? I have so many projects, they say, it's like they've got senior stakeholders breathing down going, we want to see value in this project you're doing. And I literally had that last year, a project where they went, we've got to get runs on the table, so they back off, and then we can plan. And so essentially it's a matter of looking at all the information, thinking about what we want to do as a project roadmap, and that could be launching and turning stuff on, or that could be it's all on. What about campaigns to drive use and things? So you've got to bring it all together and decide what's going to work here. It may be let's do 3 campaigns. Last year I did, let's do the first campaign around collaboration, and then let's do a campaign around unified communication, and let's put lots of products together, because collaborations, SharePoint, Skype, OneNote, it's different things, and let's tell a story for people and then make the stories tailored to departments in a way. So it's together and creating a strategy. But from the outset, as I said, quick wins. So I always, what's the low-hanging fruit? One thing that is quite common, I find, is we talked about pain points. Finding noisy people like executive assistants, those who have a voice or executives and making them happier just a bit.
Raving fans.
Yes, turning them into raving. Really good point. So, you know, whether we run sessions to make the executives feel more confident really quickly, picking roles within the business probably that are in the most pain that we can, there's always something. One example is a couple of projects we've done over the last few years was with councils across Australia. And a common theme was going into these older council buildings for whatever they do in after hours meetings and things. A lot of them printed off things, read them and took them in. Quick win there.
One note with a surface.
And so there's been a number of cases where we've replaced a really simple paper process or something they do by showing them how to, you know, put it in the cloud and work locally for that period and then go back to the office. So finding little niches and pockets where you can drive some value really rapidly. As I said, key people, noisy people who are really unhappy, simple little processes you can fix and make better and make more efficient. Or little things that you can do to get people to fall in love a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing I took actually from a presentation I went to a while ago, which was about Qantas, Matthew, I've forgotten his surname, but one thing that he said, which I really latched onto and really, really thought about a lot, was he talked about building trust by going up to an executive and taking the time to listen and sit with them and show them something that will get them thinking, this is cool, this is great, he really helped me.
Yeah.
So trust, kind of like planting some trust is something that I've then done a lot in projects more recently, and getting that buy-in really quickly as well. Sorry, I'll let you talk for a bit.
I know, I've been basking here. No, I think, you know, what Megan said about, you know, as we said, like raving fans and those quick wins. Like I've had some organisations where they've said, oh, teams. It's the shiny, I want it now. And when I've looked at it, I've gone, you have an organisation-wide communications issue. You have a legacy intranet. Yes, Teams, but right now, fix SharePoint. Launching Yammer is actually going to be better for you than launching Teams, because you'll be able to have an organisation-wide communications platform and, you know, a way to then use that to launch Yammer and build your champions programs and all these other longer-term things. The other thing, like, you know, there's been organizations where they've said, oh, well, yes, we like the concept of SharePoint as an intranet, but we've got this other system coming, blah, blah, blah. When is it coming? We don't know. Well, I could build you an intranet in a week. It's going to be really simple, but it's going to be something. It's better than what you've got now. Or, yes, you can use something like Power Apps and Flow to digitize and automate paper processes. Great. Or I could build you a form in 5 minutes flat and it's done, and then you can iterate on it later. So it's about kind of picking your battles and finding out what is going to turn somebody who, like, you know, as Megan said, an executive assistant or someone who's been in the organisation 20 years, who's going to sit there, you're going to make their life instantly easier, and who's going to be walking around saying, oh my God, this was fantastic, help me do more. That's the person I want, as opposed to the person that, what? I've got to go into this thing now.
Yeah, we did one thing to keep in mind. Some people are still suffering from an implementation. So you come in and try to do more. There's going to be that textbook resistance. A project that I did last year, we actually went, wait, before we do anything and move forward, we did a bit of a sweep and we did what we called Office 365 fundamentals. And that was a way of saying everyone needs to come up a bit before we let you go into collaborating and stuff. And I would sit in sessions where someone would say, I'd talk about sharing a link, but maybe there would be a reason where you'd want to put it in an email and do the hyperlink as the word click here. And that blew people's minds. So that's the thing. You have to understand and remember that some people are feeling bruised and confused and then just like, I'm not interested. I know it rhymes. You're excited. So there's that aspect as well. Is the pace is really important, and if you can latch onto the pace of a millennial who's really IT savvy, and you can leave behind 60% of the workforce because you lost them at like migrate, and that's as well.
Wow. So if people want to continue talking about modern workplace and user adoption and change management, obviously talk to Megan, talk to Loryan. There's a conversation happening on Twitter right now, and there's a whole bunch of people in the community joining in. If I had some takeaways, it was definitely about listening to end users, listening to your senior leadership, finding the squeaky wheels, the noisy galahs, magpies, what have you, so that, you know, you can find some of those raving fans who will be ultimately advocates, and you need a lot more people supporting this movement and advocating for it. Otherwise, it's just really IT trying to drive it, or a particular group or person. So, you know, getting a coalition of people is definitely super important. Do you have any other, you know, final thoughts that you'd like to share with the community?
Put on the spot, you go.
I'd just say don't be afraid. You know, don't be afraid to throw yourself at things, but also, by the same token, don't overly throw yourself at things just because someone said something. You know, don't just into the water and go, yes, it's safe, when there's actually rocks underneath. So, you know, Teams is the new shiny. Something else before that was the new shiny. Something may later be the new shiny. So, you know, yes, go towards the light, but, you know, look around you at the same time.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that I guess that has changed for me probably in the last 18 months or so is, as I said earlier, is it's a cultural change now.
Yeah.
It's ways of working, because as you say, the tools might alter, they might be enhanced, but it's how do we want to work together as a company, and how can I get more out of these tools? So keep that in mind. It's no longer an IT project.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. This is probably about half an hour long. I wanted to be 10 minutes, but that's okay. I think there was a lot of gold in here. So if people have stuck around this long, then they definitely have gotten value out of it. But yes, continue following us on Twitter. Well, I'm going to be having a lot of these video conversations with people from the community. I've been mainly focused on people in the APAC time zone because I'm in sunny Sydney right now. So I will get to everyone in the South Africa and European time zones once I'm back in Seattle, which is late January. But looking forward to continuing that conversation. And thank you again, Megan. Thank you again, Loryan. And I will talk to you guys shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Bye.
All right. Bye.